Can I say that this interview with Tony Abbott really is very interesting. I cover, I think, everything you'd expect me to cover in it in the space of 15 minutes or 16, whatever we did. So have a look at it. I think you'll enjoy it. Well, Tony Abbott, welcome to the program. I've waited a long time for this pleasure.
Well, let's savour the experience.
Well, we shall indeed. Now, first question is not really about politics and what's going on, but how are you? I mean, you've been the Prime Minister, now you've had a couple of years as a humble backbencher. How are you feeling, and what's your attitude to politics and your own future?
Well, that's a good question, Graham, and I've always regarded public life as a kind of vocation, if you like. Not a job, not a career, but a calling. As far as I'm concerned, I've still got a fair bit of public life left in me, and as long as the Liberal Party keeps endorsing me and the people of Warringah keep returning me, I expect to continue for a good while yet, because I'm fit, I'm strong, I'm a lot younger than a lot of other leaders around the place, and I think I've got a lot to contribute still.
Well, I have no doubt about that, and you are certainly fit. That much I think all of us can agree on. But you mentioned something there which interests me. You said, provided the Liberal Party pre-select you again. Of course, there is talk in this very factionalised New South Wales Liberal Party that the powers that be might run a candidate against you. Do you fear that?
Look, I don't. Nominations have closed in Warringah and I am the only nominee. The other point I'd make, Graham, is that whatever occasional frustrations I might have with things in Canberra, the current government is in office because I led them there back in 2013, and I think people are conscious of that. And when I was the leader, I certainly extended a certain amount of latitude to my predecessor, and so far he's been good enough to do likewise.
Well, you're certainly exploring that, and I want to explore some of that with you tonight. Let's have a look at energy policy, because that seems to me to be absolutely critical, not merely for you and the government, but for Australians everywhere. It's been one of the bugbears at a time when the last 5 years you're not seeing wage increases. You've seen massive increases in electricity prices, yep, among other things, and so people get a bit unhappy and a bit disgruntled about all that. Now, you've got the NEG, the neg. I hate hearing that term, or the Prime Minister use it today, but with that, I don't see anything in the neg that will mean another coal-fired power station will be built, and it seems to me we still need, I agree with you on that, I think eventually renewables will take over, but the definition of eventually is an elastic word, isn't it? And you don't know when you're going to get there, and I think we need to be really safe on this. We don't want the lights to go out for any length of time, so I'd like to see us building one or two of those new technology power stations, but there's nothing in the National Energy Guarantee that suggests to me it's about to happen.
These are very shrewd observations, Graham. The only time that power prices have come down in the last decade was when the Abbott government abolished the carbon tax, and there was a very swift 10% cut in power prices. But as you say, at other times they've been marching relentlessly up and up and up. They've more than doubled over the last decade. Now, the reason for this is that for most of the time we have been running our power systems not to produce affordable, reliable power, but to reduce emissions. And I just think that's wrong. The government got elected in 2013 promising to end Labor's emissions obsession, and yet the so-called National Energy Guarantee is all about reducing emissions. It's an emissions reduction policy. It's not a price reduction policy. I think that the first priority is to get prices down. The second priority is to keep the lights on. And if we are able to reduce emissions, well, that's an added bonus. But the so-called National Energy Guarantee gets the priorities absolutely upside down, and that's why I've got enormous difficulty supporting it.
When you say enormous difficulty supporting it, I know that you and Craig Kelly and a number of others, you're not alone, have got very, very great difficulty. But I can't imagine anyone actually crossing the floor. I can't imagine Tony Abbott crossing the floor. It's just something like I can't imagine's in your DNA to be able to.
And there's no doubt about it, it would be a very big step. But let's face it, Malcolm Turnbull crossed the floor on an energy policy issue, having been our party leader. And as you know, Graham, in the Liberal tradition, it's not a mortal sin to cross the floor if you feel strongly enough about an important issue. That said, I agree that for a former Prime Minister and party leader to cross the floor is a big step. But on the other hand, we shouldn't be asked to support policies which are really policies which are kind of policies for the Labor premiers as opposed to policies for the party room. I mean, this has always been one of the difficulties with the National Energy Guarantee. It's been pitched to win the support of the Labor states. It hasn't been something which has emerged from our party room. It's been something which is designed to create, if you like, a kind of a politically correct climate change consensus. And I reckon that what we need to be doing now is not trying to create a consensus, but trying to create a contest, because frankly, that's the best way to win an election. It's to create a contest, not to try to find agreement with your political opponents.
But that having been said, it's going to hit your party room next Tuesday, I think it is, isn't it? Now, on next Tuesday, the odds are it's going to go through. Where does that leave Tony Abbott then?
Again, Graham, I think the important thing is to remind people that there are people in the Parliament, there are members of Parliament, senior people inside the coalition who want power prices down, who want to end Labor's emissions obsession, who are not worshipping at the altar of the climate change gods, and who are prepared to stand up for traditional Liberal conservative values. I think that's important.
Well, but does it? Are you prepared to cross the floor?
Let's wait and see what emerges from discussions next week, and I think they're probably going to be pretty vigorous discussions. I think that there are a lot of people who have a very strong view that our challenge is to get power prices down, that our challenge is not just to keep coal in the system, but to ensure that coal continues to be part of the system, not just for the next few years, but for quite a long time to come, because, let's face it, overseas they can't build enough of these so-called high-efficiency, low-emissions coal-fired power stations, and hundreds of them are being powered by good, high-quality Australian black coal. So if it's good enough for people to use our coal overseas, why isn't it good enough to keep using our coal here in Australia?
OK, let me turn to population policy. Are we just growing too fast? We hit the 25 million mark many years ahead of schedule. What should we do now?
Well, we sure did. We hit the 25 million mark 24 years ahead of predictions. As recently as 2002, they said we would get to 25 million in 2042. It would take us 40 years to get there. In fact, we've got there in 16. Now, we certainly haven't built 40 years' worth of infrastructure in 16 years, and this is the problem. It's not migration, Graham. All of us are the descendants of migrants or migrants ourselves, so none of us can really be against migration, but that doesn't mean that we have to be in favour of the current rate of migration, which is more than double the average in the Howard years. And I think what we need to do is quite dramatically scale back the current rate, at least until housing starts, infrastructure and integration have caught up.
And have you got much support for that in the party?
Well, again, when I raised this some months back, there was a big effort by some in the government to say, look, Abbott's off on a frolic of his own. There was even some suggestion from the Treasurer that it would damage the budget if we were to scale back immigration. Then, of course, Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton, through administrative means, has reduced immigration and permanent migration at least, and that was supposed to be a good thing. So I think that there are senior people in the government who are coming round to the view that this is another area where we, the Liberal National Coalition, should be creating more of a contest with our political opponents. I think that the Labor Party is very much in the pockets of some of the ethnic activists, and I think they obviously, for their own reasons, want to see very high levels of immigration continue. I certainly think it's in our short and medium-term national interest to bring it back quite strongly. So let's do that, because in the end, our duty is to stand up for our country, to proclaim our pride in our country's achievements, to stand up for our values, and if we can do that in ways which the public might applaud, well, that's surely an added bonus.
One thing's for sure, this is not an Abbott frolic. It's very hard to go anywhere in Australia today and not get involved in a conversation about whether or not our immigration policies are allowing too many in, because I think this idea of a big Australia is becoming on the nose. I think more and more of your average punters think that, and I think Pauline Hanson has capitalised on that, which is perhaps one of the reasons why that horrible vote for your party came about in Longman. I mean, 29% is an appalling effort. I don't know what it was when you were the leader, but it was a hell of a lot more than 29.
I think it was about 45% or 46% in Longman in 2013. So obviously it's come down a long way. Look, our challenge is to ensure that we are a strong party of the centre-right, because when the Liberal National Coalition is not a strong party of the centre-right, you've got all sorts of minor parties that come in to fill the vacuum. And this is why I've always said, Graham, that you've got to be a strong and distinct and vigorous, sensible centre-right party, because if you're not strong and vigorous, less sensible parties of the right will tend to fill the vacuum. And I think that having been said, one of the issues that we're wrestling with at the moment.
But Tony, that having been said, it just seems to me that you know, in your party's case, that you've been sucking up to One Nation for a while, and all of a sudden, when you look at that result in Longman, One Nation's success was at your expense, not at Labor's. At your expense. When I say you're, a plural you, it's the Liberal Party's expense. So I'm not talking about Tony Abbott personally, but I mean seriously. They wiped 6 or 7% straight off the top of your vote, and then gave some of that 6 and 7% a fair path back to Labor. I mean, it didn't work, did it?
But Graham, again, look back to the late 1990s, early 2000s. The last time One Nation was strong, John Howard didn't see off the One Nation challenge by engaging in a slanging match with Pauline Hanson. He saw off the One Nation challenge by being a very strong and sensible centre-right government. It was strong policy work that did what was necessary. It wasn't engaging in a rhetorical slanging match, because whatever you might think about some of Pauline Hanson's positions or policies, the people who are supporting her, by and large, are decent people who are unhappy with some of the things that are happening in our country right now. So the important thing is to address the issues that are upsetting them, not to go around demonising people who are decent Australians who want to see the best for our country.
All right, look, I'm being rushed, but I do have to get one more question in. I have never seen anything like the $440 million given to this weird foundation, which no one knows much about, which employs 8 people or something, and has nowhere near the expertise to spend this money, whose bosses are too busy and too arrogant to attend the Senate to answer questions. I think it's the worst piece of public administration I've seen in a long, long time, and I do not believe it's the kind of thing you would have done. $440 million without a tender, it's very odd.
Well, Graham, obviously you've forgotten about the Pink Bats program and the school halls program, which happened under the former Labor government, where billions and billions and billions were wasted. And in the case of the Pink Bats program, we had tragically 4 deaths and something like 200 house fires. So I think
that was appalling administration, but Tony, if I can interrupt, the reason was, of course, they rushed money out because of a GFC. There's no GFC, there's no excuse here. This is normal times, normal times, and I've never seen anything like this in all my time watching politics. Never seen it.
Look, I take the point you make, Graham, but look, I know the minister concerned. I don't always agree with Josh Frydenberg on energy policy right now, but he's a highly competent minister, and I am sure he will have very good reasons for spending the money with this particular organisation as opposed to other organisations. And look, I'm very confident that this sort of issue will be canvassed in the Parliament in the coming week.
Oh, I'm certain it will be. And I might say, by the way, I don't think this has anything to do with Josh. This was a captain's call. You may recall that term. I think this is all to do with your successor and very little to do with Josh Frydenberg. Tony, can I just say thank you very much for your time. You've been very generous with it, and I really appreciate it. And as always, I wish you well.
And I hope it's... Thanks, Graham, and I hope it was worth the wait.
It was certainly worth the wait, but I don't want to wait that long next time, OK?
No. All right.
We'll work on the next one at lunch. I'll talk to you soon.
OK.
Tony Abbott. Well, he's an extraordinary man. I just can't help but like Tony Abbott. I always have, and I shall continue to so do. That's for sure.